remind you, turn your phones off and questions from members only, of course. The Press Club is proud to have Andrew Hundley here today. And Andrew carries many titles: nonprofit organization leader, coalition member, mentor, advocate, and college graduate. But it was not that long ago that he carried the label juvenile lifer. In June 2016, Andrew Hundley became the first juvenile lifer in Louisiana to be paroled following the U.S. Supreme Court's Miller-Montgomery rulings that prohibited the mandatory sentencing of children to life without parole. The Louisiana Committee on Parole recognized that he was not the same 15-year-old that went to prison in 1997. While incarcerated, Andrew completed all types of educational programs, some college courses, served as a leader in multiple prison organizations, and even taught rehabilitation and reentry classes. In August 2016, Andrew co-founded the Louisiana Parole Project to help the nearly 300 men and women in Louisiana who, like him, were sentenced to life for crimes they committed when they were children. Andrew earned an associate's degree in criminal justice from BRCC, graduated with honors from LSU in sociology, the emphasis in criminology in 2019, and this past July completed a master's degree in criminology and justice from Loyola University in New Orleans. Please help me welcome Andrew Hundley today to the Baton Rouge Press Club.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about Louisiana Parole Project and the next steps of justice reinvestment and justice reforms in Louisiana. As was mentioned, obviously, in the intro, when I was 15 years old, I was sentenced to life in prison. At that time, I had no hope to think I would come home, because in Louisiana, life means life, whether you're 15 or 50, whenever you get the life sentence. I was very fortunate that over the course of my incarceration, I was given opportunities to change and grow and to better myself through education, through leadership opportunities, through the ability to learn new skills in prison. Even at a time that I did not think I would go home, I was driven, and I must admit a large part of that drive was because of the support that I had from my parents and my family. I wanted to make them proud, even though I had went to prison and caused my family a lot of shame. I wanted to, as I matured, I recognized that the best thing that I could do was to relieve their burden, so they knew at least their son in prison was doing well and was moving forward and bettering himself. Over the course of the last decade plus, the U.S. Supreme Court has issued several decisions related to sentencing juveniles, from the Roper decision, where the Supreme Court said you cannot execute an individual for a crime committed as a juvenile, to the Graham decision, which said you can't give a juvenile a life sentence for a non-homicide crime. Then the Miller decision, which said you can't give a juvenile a mandatory life sentence for a homicide crime, to the Montgomery decision, which is actually a Louisiana East Baton Rouge case. In 2016, the U.S. Supreme Court recognized that the 2,400 approximate individuals in prisons around the country that were affected by Miller, that it applied retroactively. So for individuals like myself who were already in prison, that Miller decision applied to us. And I was very fortunate that my family could afford to hire an attorney. Hired a Baton Rouge attorney named Keith Nordyke, who represented me through the process, was able to be resentenced by a district court judge, and then be the first juvenile lifer in Louisiana to get a parole hearing. I must be honest with you, I assumed that I would be denied parole, not because I wasn't confident that I was ready to get a second chance, but because it was a new ruling. Louisiana is a very conservative state, obviously. The history of our parole and pardon board through the last several governors is that it's pretty conservative in both Republican and Democratic governors. If you go to Foster, then Blanco, then Jindal, and even under Governor Edwards, this parole and pardon boards don't have a reputation for letting a lot of people out of prison. But went and put my best foot forward, presented all the evidence of my growth and maturity, and the parole board took a chance on me and granted me parole. And in June of 2016, I came home. So upon leaving, I recognized how fortunate I was to be coming home, and recognized that a lot of the people that I had met during my incarceration were two teenagers when they went to prison, or young men, and they were not the people who they were when they first went to prison. And I wanted to help start an organization that would provide them opportunities not only to come home, but when they come home have the best opportunity to succeed. And that's the whole idea behind Louisiana Parole Project. It was an abstract idea in 2016. Fast forward today to 2021, we've helped over 215 men and women who either had life or de facto life sentences get their second chance. We call de facto life sentences people who've served 20 years or more in prison. And we have a recidivism rate, or clients who have returned to prison, less than 1% of those 215. It is a testament to how successful people can be if they're given support and opportunities when they come home. So obviously the people that we work with are people who are older. They've served at least 20 years in prison, but sometimes 30, 40, 50 plus years in prison. They're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. So they're different people than they were when they were 15, 17, 20 years old. They've matured. And so we recognize a lot of, evidence that shows that as people get older, they're less likely to commit crime. There's a significant drop-off. Obviously, for those of you who are parents, know that kids do things at a young age that they don't do when they're 5, 10, 20 years older. And that maturity process goes on for life. While incarcerated like me, especially people who are serving life or long sentences at Angola, there are a lot of opportunities for individuals to learn skills. Angola is very good at teaching someone a skill because then they want to put someone to work within the prison using that skill, whether it's small engine repair, mechanic work, carpentry, electrical work, masonry. They will give you a skill, train you, and then find you a job within the prison. Angola is a very old structural place, and it takes the people who are there that have the ability to use their skills to keep the place running. So what we see is our clients learn skills while they're in prison. They mature, they improve their education, they have leadership opportunities, they grow, they get a chance to come home. We're able to plug them into the workforce in the communities. They go from tax burdens to taxpayers. We also work with them. Obviously, they come home after doing so much time. While they have a low risk to reoffend, they come home to a world they don't recognize. Our clients generally have never used a cell phone, never used a debit card. They don't have an idea of what modern day social norms are. So our organization, when they release from prison, we actually pick them up from prison. we are there for them. We bring them. In the Baton Rouge area, we own 15 properties. We've done pretty good in just a little over 5 years of existence. We now have 7 transitional houses and 8 post-transitional condos that we own and operate that provide clients a safe, stable place to live while they get back on their feet. Our goal is to get our clients to become self-sufficient. We are serious when we say that we want them to become taxpayers, but even more than taxpayers, we want them to become active members of our community. We want them to be good citizens and good neighbors. So most people who come out of prison after doing that much time assume that no one in the community wants them out of prison, so they do their best to hide the fact that they were in prison. And what does someone who is in prison look like? This is what they look like. So most of us can blend into society. We sit next to you at church. We shop next to you at Target. We walk the lake with you. And we want our clients doing those things. We want them to feel invested in their community when they come home, because if they feel like they can be a part of this community or whatever community they'll eventually join, they'll be successful. That's why we want them to be volunteers in this community, whether it's speaking to at-risk children, serving at food kitchens, doing community cleanup projects. We want them involved, and we want them involved right away so they feel like they are a part of this community. Whenever our clients do those things, when they join churches, when they join volunteer opportunities, when they join neighborhood associations, they become part of the fabric of the community. They feel accepted and they can excel, and they're building their network so whatever job they start with, they can eventually get a better job. And we want them to be just like any other citizen to achieve, and that's why we've had the success that we have within our housing. We provide them a place to live until they're ready for us to take the training wheels off and live on their own. But we continue to work with them and provide them case management services even past that point. Our staff is made of formerly incarcerated people. We serve as peer mentors to our clients. So we have people who went through our program, got jobs, reintegrated successfully back into the community, and then we hire them to work for our organization so then they can mentor other people coming out of prison. The upside to this model is our clients can never tell us, you don't understand what it's like. You don't understand what we're going through. Yes, we do. Dust yourself off, pull your bootstraps up, and let's get to work. So we're very proud of our model, and since, as you're aware, President Trump and Congress several years ago worked on bipartisan criminal justice reform at the federal level, and soon thereafter, Governor Edwards and our Republican legislature in a bipartisan way in 2017 embarked on the Justice Reinvestment Initiative. There were 10 bills that were passed that provided individuals who had been incarcerated for a long time the opportunity to be reviewed. It also provided individuals opportunities to ease their transition when coming home into prison, coming home from prison, similar to what other states had done. Louisiana adopted best practices, did that. For a short period of time, we went from the #1 incarcerator in the country to #2. Oklahoma became #1, and then as soon as they became #1, they passed some reforms and lowered their prison population, and we went back to #1. There's still a lot of work to do in Louisiana, but compared to where we were several years ago, we have much fewer individuals in state prisons. As it relates to crime, there's no evidence that the individuals who were released from prison, so I'm not here today to talk to you about broader crime issues and what causes crime, but individuals who have released out of prison because of these reforms have a lower return to prison rate than the average than our recidivism rates before as we look at it as a whole. So there's no evidence that these individuals are returning to prison more. In fact, if we specifically segregate individuals who've served these long sentences, these 20-year life sentences, and then have gotten second chances, the recidivism rate is almost nil. It's because our organization is working with almost all of them who are coming home. To be frank, we're formerly incarcerated people who believe in these criminal justice reforms and want to see future reforms. So we see it, the onus is on us to prove that these reforms are working and are smart. So we're doing everything we can to provide support to individuals who are coming home, so legislators and stakeholders in the future can see that these reforms will work and they can take them a step further. So in particular, I want to speak to you about a particular initiative that our organization has taken up recently, and that is the Forgotten Men Initiative. Please don't get it wrong, our organization serves both men and women. However, there was a Forgotten Men Initiative decades back that was instituted by a prior governor to look back at individuals who had been incarcerated for long periods of time. Decades back, what it meant to be incarcerated for a long period of time was a different definition of what it means today. Before 1973, a life sentence in Louisiana was 10 years and 6 months. About 95% of people who were sentenced to life in prison going back to the early 1900s until 1973 was 10 years and 6 months. And we didn't have a pardon board per se as we do today. The process was that once you hit 10 years and 6 months, the warden of Angola, at that time there weren't multiple state prisons for men, and for a time for women, you would go to Angola to serve your time. And the warden, especially if you had a life sentence, at 10 years and 6 months, if you had displayed good behavior, the warden of Angola would write a letter of recommendation to the pardon board, which at that time was your sentencing judge, the attorney general, and the lieutenant governor. And imagine a piece of paper getting passed around these people. They sign off on it, send it to the governor. The governor would sign off on it. This would happen in it's estimated 95% of cases for 10-6 lifers. Generally, if you did not have good behavior, or at that time, if you were deemed a mental health case, those are the only circumstances where this wouldn't be signed. So people had something going in, life sentences had something to look forward to. Obviously, the death penalty at that time, so many people were told that there was the death penalty for many more crimes than there are today. If you don't plead guilty, you're going to potentially get the death penalty, and that obviously there weren't appeals, and that would happen much more quickly than it does now. So many individuals pled guilty, knowing they'd served 10 years and 6 months. They'd get an opportunity to come home. So in 1973, around the time that the death penalty was initially invalidated, there was a change in how legislators looked at life sentences to ensure that people with the death penalty didn't get out after 10 years and 6 months. The rule was changed by the legislature that life meant life with parole eligibility after 20 years. And then several years later, it was changed later in the 70s to life with parole eligibility after 40 years. And then 1979, the legislature passed a law that said life means life. So for individuals who received a life sentence, let's say in the late 1960s, and thought in 10 years and 6 months it's likely I will go home, the rules changed and they got stuck in prison. And in 2021, there are approximately 60 10-6 lifers who are still in prison today. Many of them have passed away in prison. A handful of them received clemency from a governor over the last several administrations. Keep in mind, getting a clemency in Louisiana for a prisoner is the equivalent of winning the lottery, especially for the last several governors who did not sign the number of clemencies that, say, Governor Edwards did in earlier terms. So in 2017, the legislature did a fix for some of those lifers who were sentenced to life with parole after 20 or 40 years, so we call them the 70s lifers, between 73 and 79. The legislature restored parole eligibility to some of them in the 2017 reforms. And we've seen many of them go up for parole and be granted go home. Some go up for parole and denied. But the pre-1973 lifers who were told they would do 10 years and 6 months, that did not have their 10 years and 6 months in at 73, got stuck there. And that's a problem because a basic tenet of our legal system is if you're told this is a sentence, this is what you do, especially if you make a plea deal. That a lot of times people don't like a plea deal, but we honor plea deals, and that didn't happen. So our organization met with, out of those 60 plus 10-6 lifers in the state, we estimated 16 or 18 of them were, our number is 18. Some other organizations say there were 16. But we say 18 10-6 lifers who were convicted in Orleans Parish remained in the Department of Corrections. And these are individuals who've served 50 plus years now and are in their 70s or 80s. And these individuals cost the state a lot of money to incarcerate. An official from the Department of Corrections testified a few legislative sessions back that it actually costs, they estimate that someone who is 50 years or older, it costs sometimes 3 times as much or more to incarcerate those individuals. So these are individuals who are low risk to reoffend because of their age, and they cost the state a lot of money. And frankly, staff at the prison has to focus so much on older prisoners that it takes their attention away from younger prisoners who really need much more attention and need much more services. So our organization worked with the district attorney in Orleans Parish, Jason Williams, to review the cases in Orleans because there were so many of these 10-6 lifers were convicted in Orleans Parish. Over the last few weeks, the district attorney and our organization have entered into joint plea agreements to re-sentence these individuals to terms of years, time served, type sentences, so those individuals can come home. There are 5 individuals who have been resentenced in the last in the last 3 weeks who've come home after serving 50 years. And these are individuals in their 70s and their 80s. Actually, last week, a man who had served 57 years, and he's 84 years old, came home. He's had a lot of first experiences: first cell phone, first time using a debit card, first time at Starbucks last week. He just thought that was the greatest drink he had ever had. So we recognize, and our organization's committed to doing the reentry work with this population because they're costing the state way too much money to continue to be incarcerated with no return for these individuals continuing to be in prison, and we're committed to doing their long-term reentry. Our hope is over the next several months we'll be able to work with the Orleans District Attorney's Office to resentence more, but also to start working with other district attorneys around the state to start resentencing people. No district attorney wants to be the first person to step out on the ledge and take such a position. So we started in Orleans Parish where we can prove that this is going to work. The reintegration can be done safely. And just to give you some numbers, in East Baton Rouge, there are 7 10-6 lifers, 7 people who were still pre-1973 lifers who they were told that they would most likely come home after 10 years and 6 months. 4 from Jefferson Parish, 5 from Caddo, 5 from Calcasieu, 3 from St. Tammany, 3 from West Feliciana, and several parishes have 1 or 2. So our organization is going to start asking district attorneys to review these cases, offer our organization to be, we're not just asking let people out and let them fend for themselves. We're going to work with the organization to help prep people. Some of our clients have families still alive willing to help support them when they are finished with our program. For those who don't, we're going to work with them until they're self-sufficient or until they can get their own apartment, and then we're going to continue to work with them to make sure that their needs are met. Like I said earlier, our work is very important to us because we left people behind who we recognize should not be in prison. And it's just, people are, our prisons, frankly, are full of aging prisoners. And it's because of the rate of which we gave out life sentences for the last few decades and the inability to get any of those people out. Our Angola is just so big, and it's just expanding, and they're just putting more beds in, and it's not a good use of taxpayer money, and it's not a good use of staff resources to care for so many older prisoners. And we're hoping that after working with district attorneys, we could potentially ask for legislation to be introduced for any individuals that district attorneys don't feel comfortable resentencing them. We would ask for legislation similar to what was done in 17 for the lifers in the 70s who came after these people I'm speaking of. They got parole hearings, allow the parole board to determine, is this person a threat to society? Can they be released safely? Or if no, they can be denied parole. So we're hoping this group of now slightly less than 60 people, for those who are not resentenced, that the legislature would consider a parole fix. Oftentimes the legislature doesn't like to pass legislation that affects so few people. But these few people represent individuals that we broke promises to, and they represent a big chunk of the Department of Corrections budget. And that money can be well invested somewhere else instead of continuing to incarcerate them in the state, footing 100% of their medical bill without any federal assistance. As you're probably aware, state prisoners aren't covered by any federal Medicare dollars. So, but we want to just let you know our organization's committed to the reentry work in this community. We've been very successful. We're going to continue to grow, but public safety is our #1 priority. We're ensuring that our clients are improving public safety because they're going from tax burdens to taxpayers. They're working jobs that other people don't want to necessarily work. And they're being volunteers and good neighbors in our community. And at this time, I'll take any questions. Yes, sir.
I got so many questions. First, let me tell you what, that's one of the best performance I ever seen from a speaker that covers so much ground and such and such down. Made me aware of so many things I didn't understand. I didn't know. Now, I could. First question. I saw in the paper just yesterday where more jobs are coming open because it's a big demand from people. With people, they got a felony on their record. Is that going to help them in a certain way?
Yes, so the question is about more jobs in the area, and will these new jobs help our organization and our clients? What I can tell you is there's a sweet spot to getting someone out of prison. I speak to you about the 10-6 lifers, and I think there are people generally who would not be sympathetic to this issue that may be sympathetic to that because they'll see, okay, someone who's in their 70s or 80s who's been there more than 50 years, that's costing the state a lot of money, let's get them out. Unfortunately, job prospects for those people aren't great. But let's talk about individuals like me who were 15 years old when they went to prison, and they spend 20, 25, 30 years. So they're going to come home as young people that have a career in front of them, whether they come home at 40, 45, 50. So we want to get those people out around that time so they can get in the job place so they have time to earn money, to use those skills while they're still healthy, have time to work 15, 20, 25 years so they could work towards a retirement. So those and that's I say this to say that we recognize that people don't have to be incarcerated 50 years to come home and be successful. There are people who commit serious crimes that we recognize have to do serious time in prison. But there is a sweet spot to get people out when they've matured, but when they're still able to work. So for those individuals that have earned, that have changed their lives and have learned skills while they're in prison, we feel like there's an untapped potential in the prison system of people waiting to come out to join the workforce.
Second question. Kids that go to prison and have drug issues there before or whenever, is that a hindrance too? Because when they get out, if they still have drug issues, is there some place that they can get help? Or is it a big hindrance and they're not going to get out?
So the question is about drug issue or dependency drug issues, a hindrance from people being successful when they come home. We recognize that once someone's an addict, they're always an addict. However, whether you know this or not, the same things that are available in the free world are available in prison. Drugs are available in prison. Alcohol's available in prison. Things get snuck in. It's contraband. So much of the prison staff's efforts are centered around detecting contraband coming into the prison. And that's when I say when staff has to worry about older people's medical issues, that's less time that they spend on security issues. So someone who's been in prison 20, 25, 30 plus years, it's hard to hide who you are for that long. So we see that there are people that continue to use drugs in prison, continue not to educate themselves or better themselves. A parole board, a judge is not going to give those people an opportunity. The people who have worked on their sobriety, who have gone that time without using drugs because they get drug tested, and over time people get busted for doing the wrong things in prison, but have been active participants in Alcoholics Anonymous in prison, 12-step program. There is substance abuse programming. Those are the kind of clients we look to help. People who've addressed their issues while they're incarcerated that can present a record of success during incarceration, but we know just because someone hasn't done drugs or alcohol for 20 or 30 years in prison doesn't mean when they come home and they're stressed that they will turn back to those things. So when any of our clients who are released that have a history of drug abuse, we're getting them into a local AA meeting. We're finding them a sponsor, and we hold them accountable to those things. And they have a parole officer in most cases who are working with us too. But just to answer your question, it can be a hindrance, but our experience is those people who have continued to display those behaviors in prison aren't getting opportunities to come home. Yes, ma'am.
Is in fact all men, is that right?
There's one woman in the group, and we refer to them as 10 6-lifers, as in 10 years and 6 months. There is one woman, and her name's Gloria Williams. She's actually the longest-serving female prisoner in Louisiana. Her nickname is Mama Glow, as she's affectionately called by the women at the prison because she's been there longer than everyone. She actually had a pretty bad case of COVID last year. She was, in the last 2 months, the governor was given a recommendation by the pardon board to commute her sentence to 99 years with immediate parole eligibility. The governor signed that recommendation, and she will have a parole hearing on December 1st. So we're representing her, and we're going to provide her reentry if she's released. So we're waiting for that parole hearing to happen before we do anything as far as resentencing. My hope is that she will be granted parole. I said December 1st, and I meant December 12th. But she is the longest-serving woman prisoner in Louisiana. How old is she? She's in her 70s. Yes.
How are you funded, and how do you compare with other states if other states do so?
Okay. How are we funded, and how do we compare to other states? So we're whenever we started Parole Project, I knew nothing about running a nonprofit organization, and none of us who started the organization knew anything about running. So we started with a budget of nothing to a shoestring budget, and what we found over time is we'd ask foundations or organizations for support, and everyone would say, well, what have you done? We'd say, well, we haven't done anything yet. We need the money. Okay, well, come back and ask us for money when you've done something. So it took us a while to figure out, and we were literally with a couple of board members chipping in money. We were able to support people rent one apartment early on, to support people pay for clients' meals and groceries out of pockets. The Huey and Angelina Wilson Foundation, after about a year of us being in existence, took a chance on us and funded our organization with some seed money. Then we started to have individual donors who began to fund us. Fast forward several years later, part of the Justice Reinvestment Initiative in 2017 was the state was going to take some of the savings from individuals who were released from prison and dedicate that back to organizations that provide reentry services and victim support organizations. So we're fortunate our organization was lucky enough to be one of those first nonprofits chosen to be funded by the Department of Corrections. So today, some of our funding is from local foundations, national foundations, the Department of Corrections, and donors in this community who provide anywhere from small donations to significant donations. Really proud that we've been very resolute about our organization not being a partisan organization, and we're really proud that our donors are both conservative and liberal donors, people that you may see given to Republican candidates and Democratic candidates. So we're really happy that we've been able to show that this is a common sense issue. It benefits everyone. If we have the funding to help people come home and be successful, it benefits all taxpayers and not really one side or the other. But each year we've been able to increase our budget, increase our resources, increase our staff, and it's because of different foundations and different individual donors. So, sorry, our organization is unique. We haven't found an organization quite like ours in other states. We get asked often, can we do what we're doing? Can we build it out in other states? And our response is, when Louisiana's number 25 in the country on incarceration, we'll worry about another state. But there is nothing quite like we do, the level of wraparound services and the commitment we have. So we can't quite compare ourselves to other states.
I was going to ask you that question. Are there other organizations in the state that do the same thing you do?
There are no other organizations in the state that focus on the population that we work with, people who've served long sentences. We recognize for so long people who, if you went to prison and you were there after 20 years, you were probably never getting out. So with juvenile lifers coming home, and then the other reforms that started to just crack the door and give some other people a second look, we realized that there was a need for that, because other organizations that do reentry work and don't quite do the level of housing, wraparound services that we do, they're waiting on someone to knock at their door who just got out of the East Baton, a 21-year-old who just got out of the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison after 6 months that needs help finding a job. That's what the kind of thing other organizations do. We're working with our clients before they're released from prison. We're going into the prisons, meeting with them, giving them an honest assessment of what their chances are of making parole, but also starting that plan before they come home, working with their families, for those who do have family support, and then being there from day one. And we think that's why we're successful. We don't tell our clients, look, go home for the weekend and see us on Monday, because we know a lot can happen over a weekend, so we start day one. So we're unique in our model, and we're unique in that we're serving a population of people who until recently weren't eligible to come home. And I would say that other organizations would be reticent to serve them because they would be seen as too high maintenance.
So what are the biggest challenges that you have? I know that the training programs at Angola are fantastic. So most of your people must have some pretty good training in all kinds of different areas. What are your biggest challenges?
So our biggest challenges are for our older clients who have been in prison so long that they don't have family left alive. Or clients that we can't find family, or the family is in poverty and them going home to live with their family would just make that family situation worse. Yes. So our biggest issue is for clients who are starting from scratch. Those are actually the clients that are most important to us because we realize without our organization, they would remain incarcerated just because they're paupers without family, and that's not a reason to keep someone incarcerated. So literally rebuilding someone's life who's been there for so long, it's very meticulous. As I often tell my staff, we have the jobs we have for the individuals who require more help. If it was only people who had it easy or were easily returnable to the community, we wouldn't have jobs. So, but we recognize sometimes there are clients who've been in prison so long that they don't know where they were born, and trying to find a birth certificate for them from another state is impossible, or that the Social Security number that the Department of Corrections has on record doesn't match the Social Security number that Social Security has on record, and Social Security is not going to give you hints as we're just trying to get someone a Social Security card so they can have identification, whether it's for a job or for the various reasons people need that. But we, as time goes on, we're having more and more success with employers taking chances on our clients. Usually if an employer will hire one of our clients, they'll come back and ask to hire additional clients. And ensuring that our clients have long-term housing. We want to eventually get our clients into their own apartments. So we work with local housing providers long-term for them to get that kind of support, but we rush no one through. If a client has to be with us 6 months, a year, 2 years, we're going to give them space until they're ready to be on their own. And even when they're on their own, we continue to check on them, and that's more than just phone calls. It's in-person visits. We've created a community of people who were in prison, who knew each other in prison, and now they're home, they're doing well, and they see someone else coming home, and they support. So it's not just our organization, and we depend on volunteers in our community, from local financial organizations, retired law enforcement, LSU undergrad students. If you ask yourself, who do you get to teach people who have never used a cell phone how to use technology? Every semester we have about 10 undergrad, intern, or volunteers from LSU who come and spend hours at our office every week to teach a client how to send a text, how to answer an email, how to load an app on their phone. They may learn how to use Facebook, and then we got to teach them, hey, if you post something on Facebook, everyone can see what you're posting. So we teach them etiquette, whether it's at work. We have individuals in the community who hire people, and then they come out and speak to our clients about the etiquette on job interviews, the etiquette in modern day workplaces. So we're very fortunate to have support from the community in that aspect.
How many clients do you have right now? How many?
24 clients in residence.
And how many have gone through the program?
217. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you.
Is there any chance, we got a legislation there, is there any chance the legislature can change this? If they change it in the middle of the ball game and these people got